If you're one of those kids who's just a know-it-all, you always think you know who's going to win the game, you always tell people that you called it and that, yeah, of course, this team was going to win, I knew that they were really good, you know. But it's all well and good just bragging over the internet, but why not win some skins? Why not play at esports pools? Like if you'd have known, for example, that Elige was going to go off in the Swiss system of ESL 1 Cologne, maybe you'd have picked him as one of your players. Obviously an underrated player. If you thought Team Liquid was going to go far, not that many other people might pick him, you know, you might have done well, but the contest's ongoing now. It's too late for you. So you know what? In a week, you know, there'll be DreamHack Valencia. If you wait until a couple of days before that, you'll be able to enter that one. In general, you can play other games, Dota, League of Legends, whatever. Now, fans love upsets in general. I realise why, because listen, in terms of the actual match in which the upset takes place, you know, it can be really exciting, can be thrilling, can be shocking what's happening. Sometimes the team has an overperformance, so the players play better than they normally do, and it's amazing. It's kind of enthralling that, wow, this player's suddenly at the level of this really great team. The problem is that upsets truly are only exciting in that short term, basically, of the game as it takes place. The second the game finishes, all the pros, all the benefits of the upset basically disappear and only the negatives appear and enforce themselves. And sometimes they massively counterbalance and outweigh, in fact, the pros. So obviously you get most of the upsets in the earlier parts of the tournaments. You get them in best of one matches, you get them in matches where you have 3 bans, you get them in matches like Swiss system or round robin, where winning a match means that it has a huge impact in terms of like what will happen later in the tournament, who's going to go where. Now, the problem to me is that the reason why they're only exciting in the short term is because of the impact they have, the effect they have on the rest of the tournament because of that upset. So in Swiss system and GSL, they give bad next round matchups. If we have an upset in the first match in GSL, then the winner's match to get out of the group might be very easy, whereas the toughest match might end up being the first match that the team that won the group played. That's not really that ideal. In Swiss system, obviously, when there's an upset in the first round or the random draw for reseeding in the next round, you could just get 2 bad teams play each other. Suddenly, a bad team's 2-0 after only really having 1 good upset out of 2 games played. Then you've got to consider that in round robin tournaments, sometimes that 1 extra map win might mean that, like Heroic at AM Katowice, you get to finish top of the group and you get to skip straight to the semi-finals, which is a format that the IEM uses. And we know famously that a lot of the teams that win the group and skip there don't end up winning the tournament, even though finally at ESL Pro League Season 5, we did have that happen because G2 actually didn't skip, managed to win the tournament. Oh no, they did skip, but they managed to win the tournament from it. Now, beyond groups, there are even worse effects that can happen. Because obviously, depending on the order of the teams in the group or the Swiss system or the initial phase, you get the playoff seeding from that. So the playoff seeding can be messed up. We can get a super strong side of the bracket. We can have a very weak side of the bracket. Famously, the top half of the bracket at E-League Season 2 was very strong and the bottom half was fairly weak, even though actually it turned out as a massive upset that the winner came out of the bottom end of the bracket. You also get games in the playoffs which become complete stomps because someone upsets in the group stage in best of one or special circumstances who isn't that good as an actual team, and they go against a good team or even worse against an elite level team in best of 3 in the semi-finals or the quarterfinals, and they get completely shit stomped and it's not an entertaining best of 3. So for the sake of one exciting best of 1, you get a bad best of 3 that isn't exciting. There's an even more nightmarish scenario that happens in that situation where there's an extra knock-on effect, which is that sometimes you have 2 upsets happen, those teams manage to draw each other in the playoffs, and that means that not only can you get a bad first round like a quarterfinals, but then the team that wins it still might not be a very good team, and now they're in the semi-final, and that makes for a boring semi-final as well. And so as a result, a team gets to the final who might be decent or good, but they never got tested along the way, and you had 2 bad best of 3s overall, because you had one where it was 2 lesser teams playing each other that were never going to go deep, and then you had a semi-final scenario where it's just a shit stomp, but super deep in the tournament, when we want those to be the best matches, hopefully. Then you've got to consider that this makes results not as cool. Like, we know North coming second at EPL wasn't really that sick a result because they were in a weak group, and then upsets within that group, including one against themselves, meant that Team Liquid played Envious in the quarterfinals, so therefore they just played Team Liquid, beat them not in a really particularly crazy series. They smashed them on one map, won the other map in close fashion, and then got to the final and lost in kind of a bit underwhelming fashion, really. And so finished second in the tournament, just actually probably as a result of 1 or 2 map upsets early in the group stage. That's really what set them in place to have an underwhelming run, even themselves, and they finished second in the tournament and didn't have underwhelming games before that. In general, this is the main reason, this knock-on effect and what it does to the rest of the tournament, why I dislike upsets so much. It's not that I'm just hating on teams that are underdogs that win the game. If they play better, great, good for them, all the rest of it. But I just don't like a scenario in which an underdog really is an underdog, and it's a fluke, and it's a one-off instance, it's a low likelihood scenario where they overperform and the other team underperforms and they get the upset win, and then it messes up the seeding for the tournament, the bracket. It messes up the first round matchup, sometimes the second round matchup, all for the sake of a best of one. Now, I get why people like upsets. I mean, on one level, they don't like results to be predictable. They want there to be an uncertainty when they're watching the game, so it's more thrilling, more exciting. There's also, though, if we're being honest, an element with some people of wish fulfillment, which is they want to believe that there are tons of top teams and that, you know, it's just a narrative that someone like SK is the best team. No, actually, you know what? Mouse Sports are actually right at the same level as them. And you know what? Team Liquid and maybe Cloud9 and Space Soldiers, if you want to go crazy in them. They want to believe that there are all these top teams and that they can all win games of each other and that's all super close, because in a world in which really there were 20 all elite teams and they all were really, really good and beat each other, yeah, that would be super exciting and it would perhaps be even the best scene possible. But it's wish fulfillment because it's almost never going to be the case. In fact, it probably never will be the case that you'll have that many good teams. And so it's just people getting too hyped up about one little fluke early in the tournament. Then you've got to consider there's an element to which it's also attractive to fans who are fans of worse teams and who want to believe their team is better than they are, and they're a bit delusional about it or a bit too generous or a little bit too overly optimistic. And so for obvious reasons, they want to believe that these teams are better and they want upsets to be legit and they want to see upsets happen. It's a pretty common theme in general. And then finally, on like a personal level of how people think about the game, I think when you get down to a lower level of play, so the majority of people who play Counter-Strike are not in the top ranks and not good enough players even vaguely to be semi-pro, never mind pro. A lot of those players, you see when they talk about themselves as players, they have very delusional thinking. And so unfortunately, they want to believe lots of ridiculous things that they can apply from their own situation to even pro team situation. They want to believe that just because they aren't good at the game, well, they want to wish that they were better at the game, or they think secretly they are better at the game, but they're being held back by some conspiracy or some component, like, you know, they're not enough good teammates to let them look good, they're in elo hell, the ranking system's all broken, it's all hackers and stuff, or they never got their big break by a team. And so they actually project and transfer the same sorts of feelings and sense about a team to a team they like but who aren't that good a team, and therefore when that team gets an upset, they think it somehow vindicates them and the notion that because they knew that team was good, yeah, they also know that they're really good. That's obviously a bit more extreme and there's less people in that sense, but I think that does play an element in it. And I think that is lurking behind in terms of the fan thinking when it comes to upsets like this. So upsets can obviously be cool. They obviously, by the way, play a key element in Counter-Strike. I mean, if you notice, one of the ways you can tell that I don't just hate on upsets is that I tend to get more annoyed by best of one upsets that I know are going to affect the rest of the bracket. If there's an upset in a best of 3, then fair enough. That team actually probably consistently had to outplay the other opponent. And even though they might be much worse, and they might be worse later in the tournament, they did a lot to get past this point now, so that's not as big an issue to me ultimately overall. I also do think there's an element to which, when you're talking about these sorts of upsets, that you have to consider that a little bit of a thrill this moment isn't necessarily always worth it if it has a knock-on effect later. Now, you'll notice that's also why when it comes to formats, I try to suggest formats in which upsets can happen. So you could have a really cool best of one upset over SK Gaming by, let's say, Optic or Space Soldiers. But if they're playing in a best of 3 in Swiss system, now the other maps come along. Listen, if they can win a best of 3, fair play. That is an upset, but it's a legit one, and there's not as big of an issue if it messes up the rest of the tournament. Whereas if SK goes and wins the other 2 maps, great. Everything happened as it should. We get the great matchups for the playoffs still. We get all the good matches later on in the tournament. SK's not out immediately. We haven't ruined the next matchup entirely, but we still got the same upset. So actually, to me, that's the ideal compromise, because you're in a world where you can have those upsets, but you're also in a world where it doesn't have as much of an impact on the rest of the tournament. Because a big flaw, a general piece of concept is, too many people think of tournament formats as the initial phase, not only kicking people out, but deciding who's good and saying, oh, whoever won the group, they must be one of the favorites for the tournament, so they should get a top seeding. No. Initial phases only do one job. They eliminate part of the field, usually half of it, and then we go into the phase that is less likely to have upsets and all the rest of it. It's more time consuming, like best of threes, like proper playoff bracket, etc., with seeding, etc. So no, it's not the case that upsets in this sense are exciting and great for the game overall. They are in a very limited sense, but they're also bad for the game in a greater sense.
Hey, I'm Hiko, the Master Baiter, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube.
Hey guys, this is Stewie from Cloud9.